So today we are speaking about freedom of expression. So freedom of expression stands as a cornerstone of South Africa's democratic foundation, entrenched in the constitution yet carefully balanced against other fundamental rights. And this guide explores the tones of expression rights in South Africa, from everyday speech to digital communication, workplace discourse and public protests. And as we navigate these conversations together, we'll uncover not just what you can say, but also where the boundaries lie and why they matter in our diverse society. So freedom of expression in South Africa is protected under Section 16 of the Constitution, which guarantees everyone the right to express themselves freely, meaning everyone has the right to freedom of expression, which include freedom of the press and other media, freedom to receive or impart information or ideas, freedom of artistic creativity, freedom of academic freedom, and freedom of scientific research. The right in subsection 1 does not extend to propaganda for war, incitement of intimate violence, and advocacy of a hatred that is based on race, ethnicity, gender, or religion, and that constitutes incitement to cause harm. So right now I am joined with Masi from probono.org. So good afternoon, Masi.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to all the listeners. Hope everyone's doing well.
We're definitely good. So Masi, firstly, let's start with you. Like, what exactly does the right to freedom of expression mean, especially under the South African law?
I think you encapsulated it quite well, actually. So your freedom of expression is protected in terms of Section 16 of the Constitution. And I think it's one of our fundamental rights, considering our history during apartheid, where your right to protest was limited, your right to speak out against the government was limited, your right to be able to share art in a specific way that might criticize government was limited. So now, as you mentioned, you do have the freedom of speech, the freedom of media, freedom of academic freedom, as well as artistic creativity, and so on and so forth. But also, as you mentioned, it is limited. It's not something that's unlimited. And the reason why your right to freedom of expression is limited is because we need to take into account other people's rights and the harm that you might inflict upon other people if you are to express your freedom of expression in an unlimited way. So the way that you could potentially harm another person through your freedom of expression is through hate speech. But that's something I'm sure we'll touch on a bit later as well. So yes, you have the right to freedom of expression. It was a hard-fought right for all in South Africa to be able to express their freedom of expression, but it does have its limitations.
So, Masi, it is important for me to ask, and you touched on this, hate speech. And like you say, we do have these rights, but there is limitations to the right if you are not using it to cause harm onto someone else. But how does South African law distinguish between free press and also hate speech?
Okay, so let's make it a bit broader when we speak about freedom of expression, right? And we compare that to hate speech. So as we said, for freedom of expression, it's the ability to be able to express yourself as you see fit. However, hate speech, and this is in terms of Section 16(2)(c), it prohibits expressions that advocate hatred, and I think you mentioned the grounds, so race, ethnicity, gender, or religion, and or if it incites harm or violence. So it's a situation where you're not allowed to say, for example, racial slurs. We have a long history in our country where certain words, and we all know these words, have been used against people of color to demean, to create a sense of belittling, to discriminate. And it's a situation where those words are mentioned in our democratic disposition. It is done intentionally to harm a person of color. Similarly, there are certain words used against women that would be discriminatory and have been used throughout history to belittle, to basically demean women. So it's something that we should take into account. And basically, when we think about the Constitution, there's a specific clause in the Constitution called Section 36 of the Constitution. And colloquially, what we call that particular clause, it's the limitation clause. So what does the limitation clause do? It basically has two tests where we have to determine whether it's reasonable and justifiable to limit your right in an open and democratic society. So, for example, if we're going to bring the case of Penny Sparrow, I think she's the one that mentioned that all the black people on the beach resembled or gave her the sense that they were monkeys, right? And that's something that is also said to demean people of color or black people, particularly in that situation. Is reasonable, it's justifiable in an open democratic society after a hard-fought democracy has come into being. And can we argue that no, it shouldn't be something that we should accept. So that's how you would test the difference between freedom of speech versus hate speech.
And must be very interesting that you touched on that example, but also like what legal consequences can someone face for engaging in hate speech, for instance, or incitement to violence? For example, let's take, for instance, something closer to home, the bullying that's been circulating amongst students that happens after school, or even the viral video of one of the LGBTIQ plus community that actually got someone fired for using hate speech against that. So if we can maybe just touch a little bit more on that, like what legal consequences can someone face for engaging in these hate speech?
It really depends. So, I mean, as a lawyer, we are able to see the various legal routes to take in order to get our clients the solution that they're seeking. Luckily, many of these routes are affordable and or free in order to be able to protect yourself. So, for example, if it's a situation where you feel that you're being harassed, right? And you feel like you are being bullied, whether it's in school or whether it's by a neighbor, if someone's swearing at you, calling you names, but trying to demean and belittle you, you are able to approach the court to get a protection order. And that is a free legal recourse. It's a free process in order to protect yourself. And with the protection order, if it's found that indeed this person has tried to harass you or tried to verbally abuse you, then what you can do is that if it's ordered that you are to get this protection order and this person contravenes or basically does the opposite of what the protection order requires them not to do, then you can approach the police and they can get a warrant of arrest issued against them. Whether that always happens in our communities, let's be honest, unfortunately, that's not always the case. But there are ways to try to enforce your rights despite the fact that the police might not be always doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. The particular example that you made now about someone in the LGBTQI plus community who's being, let's say, discriminated against in the workplace. Again, there are free ways to try to resolve that. And you can go to the CCMA. And when you go to the CCMA, you lodge a case of unfair discrimination at the CCMA. And they'll be able to resolve that matter against your employer because it's your employer's responsibility to protect you in order for you to at least get the protection that you're seeking. Or even if it's a situation where you left because the discrimination that you've been facing, the harassment, the slurs, the verbal abuse, it created an environment which was so intolerable for you. There's something called constructive dismissal where you left after trying to address the situation internally and it was unsuccessful and you go to the CCMA. So there's many ways to try to resolve these circumstances, even without a lawyer.
But just some clarity around that. Technically, the person does not work at the same company. Someone was lashing out on social media. So the influencer that's part of the LGBTIQ plus community sent an email to the person's workplace and actually got the person fired.
I think what would be important to find out is what was the charge for the person to get fired for. I mean, if we're going to go into the specifics of labor law, there's certain grounds that you can only be fired for or dismissed for, and that's only after a disciplinary hearing. It's not only after certain processes being followed. It's not a situation where you can just simply be fired unless it's a really, really serious situation. So if you're saying that there's specific information sent by an external party to the employer, that needs to be really serious as to why this person was dismissed. And if this person is being dismissed because of their LGBTQIA plus status, that's discrimination. That matter can go to the CCMA, it can go to the Equality Court. There's many ways that someone can try to seek a resolution for that.
Thank you very much, Masi, for shedding some clarity on that. So, I basically asked people, and the lines are open, of what freedom of expression means to them. And this is just a few WhatsApps that we received.
I should be allowed to say what I want to say, but also keeping in mind that I should not go out of my way to offend other people, and I should be allowed to wear what I want to wear if that is how I choose to express myself.
To me, basically, it means that I have the right to speak up to injustice. I have the right to speak my mind when I see something is not right or it's something that I do not believe in. I have the right to speak my mind. And because we have that freedom of expression is a right in South Africa, because if not, that would be violating my right. Stand up for what I believe in, and that my voice and other voices are respected.
Hey, this is Alex Kibadoya from Brainchild. Freedom of expression to me means that you are free to express how you feel, what you think, in any which way possible, in any which way you feel like expressing yourself, whether through art, sing, or dance. You have the freedom to express yourself.
So, Masi, as you hear, and that is just some of the WhatsApps that we received so far that I've played. There is more, but currently what the people are saying is that they have the right to free speech. And earlier you stated clearly that these rights comes with limitation if you are not causing harm to someone else. And one of the things that the listener also highlighted is that she has the freedom to dress into whatever she wants to that makes her feel comfortable. Okay, so we're just going to continue.
So freedom of expression means that I can basically share my thoughts and opinions without facing any backlash from public or anyone.
I think you must reply to that one, as that listener is stating clearly that he has freedom of expression without getting any backlash from anyone.
Yes, so that's an interesting point, because when it comes to freedom of expression, it doesn't necessarily mean that what you are saying is not offensive. It doesn't mean what you're saying is not controversial. But what it does mean is that it shouldn't be a situation where you're trying to discriminate against another person or you're trying to harm someone on the basis of their identity particularly. So when you're speaking about trying to discriminate against someone because of their race, their gender, their disability, their sexual orientation, that goes more now down the line of the hate speech particularly. And when we're speaking about hate speech, there are civil consequences, but also criminal consequences as well. So when I say civil consequences, someone can try to bring a defamation case against you. They might try to claim against you financially. But when you're speaking about criminal consequences, that would bring into play where you could potentially be fined and or be imprisoned due to the statements that you made, especially just considering how serious the fact that you are trying to harm someone's dignity by discriminating against them. So it's a very tricky line to balance, but at the same time, it's not something where you're merely saying something that's offensive or merely saying something that's controversial. That wouldn't necessarily be deemed as a situation where you are committing hate speech.
Definitely.
The right to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive and import information and ideas through any media regardless of frontier.
Okay, that one is very soft.
The ability to express my idea, opinion, and beliefs freely without the fear of government censorship or legal repercussions. It can be done in various forms of expression, spoken or written word, artistic words, through the media, or even social media. But there are limitations. For instance, hate speech, defamation, national security, and privacy. So you can't incite violence or promote hatred based on your race, religion, gender, etc. And you cannot damage somebody's reputation unjustly or spread false information. You can't threaten national security or public order, and you cannot infringe on somebody's right to privacy or dignity. It means you have the power to voice your opinion and participate in public discourse, but you have to understand that there are legal boundaries. So you can't incite harm or spread falsehoods.
It means being able to express your emotions, being able to express and receive information and share ideas without having any fear of what may come if you share information with the public.
It's the right to express one's own ideas, thoughts and opinions, really through writing, printing, pictures, spoken words or any other word.
That you have a right to share your opinions and your beliefs without the fear of being punished.
Building the nation, yes, we are building the nation. Well, freedom of expression to me means having to express yourself without any censorship, where you can just share your views, share your opinions, being able to just indicate your human right to dignity. Just, in a form of art as well, through just drawings or through just using body movements. It means a lot, just having to be able to have that part of freedom of expression, because it just shows one belongs on planet Earth and also have that element that allows them to be humans in this life.
Babe, freedom of expression simply means when you can express yourself fully without fear nor favor. When you can tell people how you feel about whatever. It can be anything and everything.
You have the freedom to raise your opinion freely as long as you do it in a respectful manner. Expressing what's bothering you, whether it is via the media or whether it's at the workplace.
So there is a lot of concern around just listening to some of the listeners that basically says that they have the right of freedom of expression by saying anything that they want. And then also taking in account, there was one listener that basically spoke about defamation. And this is something you touched on earlier, Masi. So we're going to get into a little bit more in depth on that. But one of the things that I've noticed is most of the listeners are speaking about sports, for instance. They're bringing arts into the making when it comes to freedom of expression. And that is what some people use to express themselves without thinking that there are any consequences. So just before we run out of time, if we can just touch on what the legal consequences of defamation is and how does it actually impact free speech?
So when it comes to defamation is where you have now harmed someone's reputation to what you have said. Now, again, like I said, this is more of a civil route to try to get some kind of legal recourse for the situation. But when it comes to defamation, there are limitations. So defamation laws limit free speech when the speech is false and causes harm to the individual's reputation, like I said. And I think what we should put emphasis on is also where someone's dignity has been impacted, right? Now, it's important to note that truthful statements and comments made in the public interest are usually defended against defamation claims. So if what you're saying is the truth, despite it being something that's a bit hurtful, or if something that you're saying is good for the greater good, then that's something that should be allowed. For example, whistleblowing. If you're noticing that there is a situation where there are certain practices in your workplace that shouldn't be taking place, and you make that now public record, and that's going to now lower the reputation of your employer. At the end of the day, defamation wouldn't necessarily be applicable because you whistleblower. That's important. That's a matter of public concern. So there's many things to balance, but especially in the age of social media where people feel that they are able to comment, tweet, and do as they like online, there are so many consequences that come to that, especially when you repost, because from my understanding, if someone is commenting or posting something that is defamatory and you repost it, that means that you are continuing that publication. And when it comes to defamation, it's a matter of broadcasting that particular opinion that is lowering that person's dignity, lowering that person's reputation. So again, be careful. And I know that when it comes to online use specifically, people feel a bit more free, and because they're behind the screen, they feel a bit more protected. But at the end of the day, we've been seeing many, many examples of people being taken to court what they have said online.
And that basically applies also to misinformation and fake news.
Oh, 100%. Especially where it's a situation where that's intentionally being spread. And I think that's something that would have to be taken into account. But at the end of the day, if it's a situation where there's fake news being spread and it's with the intention to misinform, and also it's a situation where that's not true, that would apply when it comes to defamation.
But Masi, what happens in a sense where it's, I won't say from a reliable source, but someone that you respect highly and you wouldn't think that this is the person that will be circulating fake news and so forth. So you unknowingly are sharing the news or the same message that that person has been sharing. Is there any legal prosecutions or consequences towards your side as the sharer because you're doing this unknowingly?
So it really depends from case to case, because when it comes to defamation, I think for some situations, perhaps one could argue that because you don't know whether that person is spreading false information, you continue to spread false information. That would be something to take into account. Intention is a very important aspect when you're speaking about defamation. So you need to intend to harm someone. So if you genuinely thought that it's true and you have that kind of proof to back that up, then that would be something to take into account. Look, if we're being quite honest with ourselves, we don't see a lot of people being able to take a defamation case to court because you usually would need a lawyer to do so. So it's not a situation where we're seeing people posting online and then because there's a post being made online that lowers their dignity or lowers their reputation, that matter is now being taken to court because ordinary people don't have the money for that. But what we are seeing, and I'm sure many of your listeners can agree, is there are lots of protection orders out there. So when it comes to protection orders, you would need to have your evidence in order to ensure that you can prove to the court that indeed this person is harassing you or this person is verbally abusing you. And that essentially this is something that you should be protected against. When it comes to defamation, yes, fine. It's something that you can be protected against, but it's very expensive to get a lawyer to protect yourself against defamation in the sense that you want to go forward with a defamation case. When it comes to protection orders, and I would also include electronic or online abuse as well, where there's bullying online, that would also fall part of protection orders. And you have to take screenshots in order to show the courts that you are being mistreated, harassed, or verbally abused or abused via cyber means.
Thank you very much, Masi, for availing your time. There's so much more that we can discuss when it comes to freedom of expression, because this is one of the rights that people take so lightly. So just if anyone wants to reach out to probono.org for more information, as you touched on a few valuable aspects today, how do they do it?
So if you would like to get in touch with probono.org, you're welcome to give us a call. Our number is 087-470-0721. We also have an email address. Our email address is info@cpt@probono.org.za. I'll give you our number again. It's 087-470-0721. We assist with free legal assistance, and we are located in the city centre in Short Market Street.
Amazing stuff. Thank you very much, Masi, for availing yourself. Till next week,